Good day everyone, welcome to another episode of my Python tutorial series. My name is Eliazar and you are watching EA Lego Academy. So in our last video we were trying to build the structure, that is build the GUI, the graphics for our banking system. So we were not done. We successfully created the sign up page, the login page, and then the account info page. So we want to proceed. So let me just run it once more so that we can be able to see what we have. So this is the default. So we don't want it to open up anything except we have entered the person's name. So we're going to make a few corrections on our code, then we're going to continue. So now I want to create another function that allows me to navigate to this window screen once I click on this button. So I'll just come down here and I'll create a function. So I'm going to call this function, I'll call it info register. So info register, and it's going to have its own window screen. So I'll say window is equal to tkinter.tk, and I'm going to give it a title, and I'll just say register. I'll come here and I'll give it a geometry. I'll say window dot geometry, and I'll give it 300 by 400. So after that, I'm trying to create buttons. Now you notice that this button, that is, there are two buttons side by side. So in order to arrange them like this, in this manner, I created a frame, or I am going to create a frame whereby I can place these two buttons on, and I will create another frame where I can also place these other two buttons on. So I'll come here and say frm1 is equal to tkinter dot frame. Then the frame is on my window screen. That's all. Now I'll come here and say frm1, and I'll give it a park geometry manager, and I will say field is equal to tkinter dot both, so that as I increase the window screen, the frame will also adapt to the size of the window screen. Now I'll come here and say expand is equal to tkinter dot yes. Now I will just copy this frame, since I have two frames, copy it and paste it, and then I will change this one to frame 2. So I already have some buttons created down, so I'm not going to stress myself typing, that is creating new buttons again. What I will do, I will just copy this button from the previous code, from my account info. I will copy it and I will paste it directly under this, and after that I can just come here and change the name to deposit. I'll come here, I'll change this one to frm1, and I'll change this one to deposit also. Now I can just copy this and duplicate it, copy it and then paste it down, and I'll call it withdraw. So I want to be able to edit them at the same time so that we can scale our time. So withdraw, and after that I will have to change the text so that it can display a different text. So I will just say deposit, and then here I will come here and say withdraw. And after that I will just copy the same button, both of them this time around, so that I can create paste the other buttons, or create the other buttons underneath the deposit and the withdraw button. So the change pin and the change email. So I will just come here and I will edit it as well. So I'll give it a name of change pin. So change pin, and I'm going to display it on my frame 2. Now I'll change the text to change pin. Change pin, and I'll edit this one. Now I'll change the text. I'll change the name to change email. Change email, and after that I'll change the frame also to frame 2. I'll come here and I'll change it to change the email, and after that I'm going to run the main loop. So I'll say window dot main loop. So now before I run the code, I will need to pass this window screen. I will need to pass the function to the click of this my account info, so that I'm going to use this button to call the function that will generate this window screen, which is this function. So I will just come here to my account info and I'll give it a command, so that when I click on the button, it's going to generate the window screen for me. So I'll come here and say command. I'll use my lambda because I want it to have a parenthesis. So I talked about this already in my previous tutorials about the lambda function. So you can check my tutorial on Python functions. I explicitly addressed it there. So I'll come here and say self dot info register. Okay, so that's it. So let us try to test the code. So I'll run my program, click on login, click on account info, and you see that it generated. So it's wrong, it's generated in a wrong way. So we will need to address this so that we will not be making mistakes. Now the reason why you are seeing that they are stacked on top of themselves is simply because in the withdraw, so let me close this, in the withdraw, that is in this window screen, you notice that I just said fail tick enter both expand tick enter.ts. I will need to give it a side as well. So I'll come here and say side. So the side tells you exactly where you are trying to place that widget on that frame. So I'll say side left, and I will just copy this as well and paste it for all of them so that they will all be arranged in that manner. Paste it beside and then paste it beside. So let's try to run our code again to be able to see what we have. So log in, and you can see that they are placed side by side. So what I'll do, I'll give them a proper geometry size. So I'll give them a proper geometry, that is the window screen. So I'll just say 400 by 400. Let's see what that looks like. 400 by 400. Okay, it's still not aligned properly. So let me make it 500 by 400. So I can just come here and say 500 and try to run that again. So log in. So you can see that okay, they are properly aligned. It looks close. It resembles that of my diagram, my sketch. Alright, so the next thing I want to do is that when I click on, so I'll start with the deposit button. I'll create a window screen for that. So I'll come here, I'll say deposit, and I can just create a window screen. So window is equal to tk, and after that I'll come here and say window dot type 2. I'll just say deposit. So deposit, come down here, say window dot geometry. I'll give it a size of 300 by 400. So I have a label for the amount, I have an entry widget, and I have a button. So I'll just come here and say amount is equal to tkinter dot label, and I'll give it a window screen. Window, I'll say text is equal to the amount that I'm trying to display, as the text for the amount. I'll say font. Now I'll give it a font of Arial and 30. And after that, I will just paste it. I'll pack it rather. I'll say pack. So now, since I'm not placing it on any frame, you will notice that they are all stacked upon themselves in a vertical manner. So you can use an ordinary pack geometry manager to achieve this. So I can use an ordinary pack geometry manager. So they are already packed, but I can just decide to add a few things so that it can be more aesthetically pleasing. So I'll come here and I'll ensure that it fills both ends and it expands as I increase the window screen. So I'll come here in the parentheses and paste that. So that is for my label widget. Now I'll come here and create for my entry. I'll just say entry. I'll say amount entry, EMTENTRY. I'll say tkinter dot entry, and I'll pass the window screen, and I'll come here and say font. So now the font is so that whatever text you decide to enter, it is that size. So it has that size. After that, I'll paste the geometry managers, or rather the options in my pack geometry manager. So to save myself the stress, instead of typing for buttons again, okay, let's just type it. So I'll just say deposit. So deposit is equal to tkinter dot button, tkinter dot button. I'll just come here and say window. My window screen text is equal to deposit, and I can just come here and pass the font and specify the type of font I want. I'll come down here and say deposit dot pack. Now just paste it in the parentheses also. So after that, I want to be able to run the main loop. I'll say window dot main loop. Okay, so now before I run this code, I want to pass this function. I want the button for the deposit to be able to call this function to display my window screen, so that when I click on this button, it displays the window screen. So I'll come here in the deposit, and here I'll just pass a comma, and I'll say command is equal to lambda. Of course, you don't want to forget, so that you can pass a parenthesis. I will say self dot deposit. Alright, so let us try to execute the code. So I'm sure we have not forgotten what self means. Self simply means the class while you are inside that class. So it refers to the class while you are inside the class. So you click on login, click on account info, click on deposit, and you see we get our deposit with the entry widget, the button, and then the text. So we have our banking system is almost complete, the structure, before we start adding the logic. Now the next thing I want to do is to create another function such that it allows me to open up the pin. Now, to save ourselves the stress, if you look at the structure of the amount, the email, the amount, the pin, they all have the same structure. So the label, entry, and button. So and they are all vertically, they are all arranged in a vertical manner. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to copy this code for the pin aspect, that is the pin window screen, the amount window screen for the withdrawal, and for the changing of email. So I'll just come here, copy it, create a new function, call it change pin, and then paste it in there. Now after I've pasted it there, I'll just come here and say change pin. I'll change the type to change pin. the text, instead of it being amount, I will come here and say pin, and then for the button I'll just come here and say pin change, and that will be all. And after that, I'm going to pass this function to, I'm going to use this button for change pin to call the function. So in the parentheses, I'm coming. So I'll just move the scroll bar, the horizontal scroll bar, and I'll come here after the font, put a comma. I'll say command. I'll say is equal to lambda. I'll say self dot change pin, and that will be it. So we can do the same thing for the change email and then the amount for the withdrawal. So I will do the amount for withdrawal first. So I will come here and say withdraw. Now I'll just paste the code there also. Now I'll change it to withdraw. That's all. Withdraw. Then I'll come here and I'll change the text here to withdraw also. Withdraw. And after that, I'm going to create the last function, which is for the changing of email. So I'll say df change email. Now paste my code there also. And I'll change it to change email. And then I'll come here and I'll change the text to email, and I'll change this text here to email change. So email change. Now after that, I'm going to pass these two, that is the functions, I'm going to pass it to those two buttons I have. So I'll come here. So the two buttons that are left are the withdraw and the change email. So I'll just come here. Okay, so I used camel case. I used a Java syntax to write my variable, so that's why it was underlining it. Not to worry. So you just come here for your withdraw, press enter, then you just hit command is equal to lambda, then I say self dot withdraw. So what I'll do, I'll just change this one so that they will not clash. Change it to 1. Then for this change pin, add 1 there, and then I'll come here and I'll add 1. So I know why I'm doing this, so that they will not clash, the names will not clash, because Python does some funny things sometimes. So if with this email, change email, I'll add 1 to it, and I'll come here and I'll add 1, so that I can be able to use that change email name of my function. So I'll come here, put a comma, and I'll say command, I'll say lambda, and I'll say self dot change email. Change email. So you can just come here, click on place. So let's test if everything is in their rightful place. I'll click on account info. If I click on withdraw, it opens the withdraw window screen. Click on change pin, opens the change pin window. Click on email, changes the email deposit. So we have seen that everything is working well, but we have not yet applied the logic yet, even the sign up. So even the way they are arranged, you can see that it is not arranged properly. So what I will do now, there's something in Python we call pad x. Pad x means like you are giving some space at the front of your widget on the x-axis, and you also have pad y, which means that you are giving some space at the front of your widget on the y-axis. So I'm going to apply pad x to this my ID on my home window screen, so that this entry widget can be shifted to be aligned on the same line as this first entry widget. So that is what I'm going to do. So I'll go to the very first window screen that we created, that is the main one. Now look for my ID. So now in the parentheses of the path, I'll come here and I'll say pad x it is equal to, I'll just give it 30. Let me see how far it takes it. Okay, so it's very close, it's almost close. So I'll just increase it a little bit, maybe by 2, and let us see. Okay, so I'll not increase it by that much. Let me see, 35. What am I doing? Hold on, sorry, that's the wrong thing I was doing. I'm changing the Arial, the font. I was changing the font, so I was supposed to change it from here, not there. My mistake. So pad X equal to 32. Try and run that again. You can see it's very close. It's very close. If you are looking for perfection, you can add a few more distance to it. So what I'm simply saying is that the distance of this my label widget from the other entry widget it has a distance of 32 pixels. So there's 32 pixels from this entry widget to my label widget of my ID. So if we check the other ones as well, if I click on login, and if I click on sign up, you will discover that there's a bit of a disalignment. So I'm going to apply the same thing to them as well. But before that, let me just quickly adjust this one properly so that it can be on the same line. So I'll just give it 33. Let me see how that will make it. 34. So let us try 34, the final one. Alright, so you can see it has properly aligned it. So that's what I'm going to use, 34 as well for my sign up page. So I'll just copy it instead of wasting my time. Highlight it like this, copy it, go to the sign up page, check for the ID, paste it there. Let us check it out. Click on the sign up, you see that it has aligned. Now the text has to be smaller so that the entry widget can become bigger. So this one is going to be a bit difficult, except we reduce the size of the text. So we'll just leave it that way. Then for the pin, I'll have to align it to be on the same line as the email. So let us see how that will work. Or rather, what I'm going to do, I'm going to ensure that everything is on the same line as the balance. So I think that will be better. I'll make sure that they are on the same line with the balance. So I'm going to give them 64 each. So I'm going to apply this 32, or rather this 34 to my name entry. I'll apply it here, and then after that I will come here and change this one to 64. Let me see what that will give me. So I'll click on sign up. Okay, so we're almost there. Just that there's a bit of a problem now. So the problem that we have is that for the entry widget, that is for the entry widget for the name, it is also adjusting it in an awkward manner. So let's see where we are making a mistake. So the entry widget, so I think I passed it there, so that's why. So I passed it to the entry widget, so it's adjusting the entry widget instead. It is supposed to be for the label widget of my name label, that is this name. I'm supposed to pass it there instead. Control V, and then I will stop my program, try and check it out again. So it should have adjusted itself. Okay, it's a bit too much, so what I'll do, I'll just reduce them back. So I'll make name maybe 20, 24, and I'll make ID maybe 50 something. So 24, 54, maybe 54, and then this one 24. So let us see if we will have we would have made progress. So they are almost aligned, almost just a little bit of pushing. So now I will move this one a bit down to like maybe 52, and then for the name I'll move it to like 22, or let me just say 20. So let's see how that will work. I'm coming, just a second. Okay, so you can see that they are almost aligned. It's just that name is not properly aligned. So I'm going to move name a little bit backwards again, maybe to like 18. So this is just aesthetics anyway. It's not important to our code. The point is that we create the banking system and then the logic works perfectly. So you can see that they are all aligned. Now the next thing I want to do is to move this my label widget, increase the distance, that is push this entry widget closer to align with the entry widget of my name, ID and balance. So that is what I'm going to do. And of course you apply the paddx to the email label widget, not the entry widget, because it's going to start to align it from the right hand side if you applied it to the entry widget. So I'll come here. So it's my, which one is that? I think that was the email. Okay, so for my email I'll come here and I'll paste the pad X to 34. Let's see how that will look like. Okay, so it pushed it real far. So what I would do, I will just change it to be like 24. Let us see how that looks like. 24. Okay, still far away, so I'll just move it to be like 18. Let's say 18. Let's see what that will look like. So it has passed it a bit, so I'll make it 20. So 20. Let's see how it will align. I'll give it 21. Let me say 22. Alright, so I'll just leave it at that. Now let me move this pin, the entry widget, to align at my email. So for the entry widget, for the pin, I'll just scroll down. I'll look for the pin. I'll come here and say pad X is equal to, so I will give it a distance of, let me say 50. Let me see how far it's going to push it. Okay, so it pushed it way far, really far. So I will come here and I'll change it to like 45, taking it backwards. Let's see. So it's very close, not too close. I'll make it 42 and see how it's going to align. Alright, so I think I'll just leave them like that. That's enough aesthetics. So now let's proceed to our logic. Now we want to be able to import JSON. So JSON allows us to be able to carry out data persistence, in the sense that when you write code on your system, when you are trying to save data on your local machine or your operating system, once you perform a save, you can easily retrieve back that data. So I'm going to import JSON, and in this my class, in my initializer, I'm going to create some parameters that we're going to make use of. Now if you can remember, I'm just extending a project we have already done. So one of the projects we did was that we created a file such that it was not in existence yet, and then we now try to check if it was existing, and if it was in existence, we were going to read from that file. But if that file was not in existence, we were going to create the file. So now there's something we need. There's a module in Python called the OS module. Now that OS simply means operating system. So it's a module that allows us to be able to access the parts of files on our operating system. So I'm going to import that as well. So you can go to my previous tutorial, my previous banking tutorial, and you will discover that these were the exact same modules I imported to use. So I'll come here and create a conditional statement and say if os.part.exists. So you can confirm that in my past tutorial so that you'll be able to understand and recall. You can confirm that. So I'll say if os.part.exists, and I'll come here and I will say data, I'll just call it info, and then I'll say, so now my JSON has a class called dump. So it has a class called dump, and I'll say data, and I'm going to dump it into my file. But before I do that, I'm going to first attempt to open a file. I'll say with open, and I'll check if that file is in existence. I'll say with open, trying to attempt to read from the file, say fx, then I'll come here and say data is equal to json.dump, and I'll pass the variable, I'll say data fx. So if the file is in existence, I'm going to try to read from that file. But if that file is not in existence, I'm going to write to the file. So I'll now come here and say data is equal to, so let me not repeat the name data, so I'll just say data info, and I'll say data info. So it's going to be a dictionary. So you can go to my past tutorials when I talked about creating a banking system. It's all very intuitive, so very intuitive, and you'll be able to follow along. So I'm going to create a default structure of how the bank is expected to be. So Python needs you to be able to create a default structure of how the people's accounts are going to be. So as you are creating accounts in your database, you want to ensure that you have given Python a structure on how it's going to create those informations. That's what you want to do. So once you do that, I'll just come here and say name. So this is the format I want to have. As you can see in my graphical user interface, I have name, ID, balance, email, PIN. So that is how I'm going to do that. So I'll say Alex, I'll create a default user. Alex, I'll give him an ID. Say ID. So no, hold on. This is the ID already. One is the ID, so it's not going to be part of this. So the next thing that I'm going to create is balance. And I'll give him a default balance 2743860.50. So it's going to be a float value. And I'll come here and say email, and I'll say alex@gmail.com. and I'll come down here and I'll say PIN 1234. Alright, so this is the structure. So it's going to attempt to read from that file. If that file is in existence, it's going to load it into a variable called data info. Now if that file is not in existence, it's going to proceed to create that file. So that is what I'm trying to do. Now we need another function to be able to be saving our progress. So I will create another function. I'll call it save, so that I can be able to be saving my work. Now I'll come here and I'll attempt to save the file. I'll save it open. So it's going to be that same data set that I'm trying to save. So you will notice that the name of the file is data. So that will be the name of the file I'll pass in the parentheses of this function, so data. But you notice that this data cannot just be accessed anyhow. So In order to access it, I'll need to come here and say self.data, but I haven't created it yet. So what I'll do is that in the initializer, I'm going to add a self parameter, because self just simply means that I am referring to that class while I'm inside the class. So self, and then I also come here and pass the self parameter as well, because I'm inside the class, so I have to refer to the class using the self parameter. And this variable as well is also in the self parameter too, so I have to give it self as well, and I'll come here and say self also. So that is basically what I'm trying to do. Then I'll come here, and then automatically you can see that it's already accessing that variable JSON file. So this is going to be allowing us to be saving our work at each point. So it means that if I make an update, like create an account or withdraw, it's going to override or update that data that is already in that file. So I'll come here and say fx, and I can come here and I'll just call the JSON module, and I'll say dot dump again, dot dump, and I will just pass the data I am trying to dump into it. I'll say data info. So I'll say self dot data info because it belongs to the class. So I'll say self dot data info, and I'll say fx. So I'm trying to save it at each time I'm trying to access my data. So this one is actually load. So JSON dot load, and we're trying to load the file. So that was my bad. I'm not saving here, I'm simply trying to load from, that is, if that file is in existence and it has data, I'm trying to load the data from that file. Or if that file is not in existence, I'm trying to create it. And each time I perform an update on that file, I want to be calling this function at every point where that update was performed. Now also, I'm going to create functions, a function to create the account. To create an account, I'm going to call this function to create an account, and of course it needs to have an ID, so it has to have all the information of the person whom you are trying to create an account for. You pass name, you pass the balance, you pass the email, and you pass the PIN. So I can just come here and say info. So I'm trying to create an account. So of course it has to be a dictionary, and it has to be in that same format in which you gave it a structure. So I'll just say name, then you come here, then you pass the balance, so it has to be spelled the exact same way, balance, and then you come here, pass an email, and then come here, pass the PIN. So I'll just come here, and after that I'll just call the name of my database, that is my variable that I'm trying to update. I'll say self.dataInfo, open a square bracket, say ID. So you can go back to my previous tutorials to confirm what I'm doing here. And after that, I'll just call this function here. So I'll say self.save. So I'll call the function so that it can save my data in this function. So every time I access this function and I'm trying to create a new account, I'm going to save. So that's the function for creating a new account. But I've not started running this program yet. So I'm going to run the program. So I will create another function that allows me to withdraw. So I'll call it withdraw. Now, of course, this function is to know who it is withdrawing from. I'll say ID, and you have to specify the amount that you are trying to withdraw. So I'll come here and say print balance before withdrawal. You come here and say balance before withdrawal. So open curly bracket, you see self dot data info. Of course, you have to target the ID first before you now target the balance. So you see, so now I have to use single quotes because I've already started with a double quote. So Python convention, each time you start a sentence with a double quote, you will need to be able to, if you are going to write a quote within that function, you will need to use single quote. So what I will do, I'm going to just stop this video here because I want to take a bathroom break. I want to go and ease myself, take a pee, rather I'll take a leak, as they say. So I'll be back. So I'm going to break this video into two. So I'll quickly go and pee, and then I'm going to come back and do the third part. So I'll just quickly stop here. So far, if you are feeling my video, if you are feeling what I'm doing, if you are enjoying what I am doing, please hit that like button. And if you feel like this content is going to be of an importance to someone, please share. And to encourage me to do more content like this, please subscribe to my channel. So I'll be right back. Let me just go and relieve myself, take a pee.